name is Harold Davis. I'm here to teach you about the art and craft of digital photography.
Hello, and welcome to the Harold Davis Studio in Berkeley, California. This webinar is all about photographing bottled light. How creative can you get with colored liquid, sunshine, some glass bottles, and a camera? In this webinar, Harold will show you how he uses these simple materials to come up with entire new worlds, recreations of Mark Rothko paintings, abstractions, highways at night, and much more. Even if you don't have any food color sets around, you probably have colored liquid like soda pop, brandy, maple syrup, cherry juice, red wine, and even blue Gatorade will all work very well. Be creative. What can you do close to home with these everyday materials? You'll be surprised at how easy it is to get fantastic results. Many of you know who Harold is, but if you're joining us for the first time today, here's a little bit about Harold. Harold Davis is the developer of a unique technique for photographing flowers for transparency, the creator of multi-raw processing and hand HDR processing, and he is a Moab master and a Zeiss ambassador. Harold is an internationally known photographer and a sought-after workshop leader. His website is digitalfieldguide.com. Now I will hand it over to Harold. There we go. Hello, Harold.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Phyllis. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, as always. I'm so glad to be here and so glad to be sharing this with you today and looking forward to having a really fun time. My secret weapon in this technique is food color, although you don't need food color to do it. So just to show you here, let's get the camera to focus on this, is a set of McCormick food colors. Here is a classic Betty Crocker, which is okay. And really the best stuff is this stuff, which I'll show you how it works. This is Chefmaster liquid gel food color, tasteless, no calories, gluten-free certified, good stuff. So, you know, good for baking a cake and good for photographing in liquid. I'll bring it down with me when I go to the shooting area and show you how I use it. Let me get started on a slideshow. And this one I'm going to keep relatively informal. That's about as good as this gets, I guess. So I started with this when I first started experimenting with this. I was doing the kind of images that you see here, which well, let's go back to the first one. So this is the side of a carafe here with the colored light coming through. We're really at the, and here you can see this is the side of a sort of glass vase with another glass vase on the left meeting like this. So we're in the realm of abstractions where you can still make out the shapes. This is the top of a bottle, the neck of a bottle going up like this with sunlight coming through. So a couple of things to say right off the bat. One is to focus on the light. And here, this composition shows it's actually a maple syrup bottle on the right. I think we've drunk all that maple syrup sometime during the pandemic, so I don't have that maple syrup, but I have some other colored liquids. So here you can see the two bottles. So this is a kind of representational. As time went on, some of what I began doing with this was less representational. But okay, so rule number one, focus on the light, not the shapes. Rule number two, be very mindful of edges. Where do things meet? Because that's what's going to be really important here. Also note, and we'll talk about this more when I go down and do some photography, that these are all shallow depth of field images for the most part. These are all handheld, easy to do. There's almost no post-production in this work, and that's unusual for me. I like doing post-production. Okay, so one of the things I started to realize was that there's no reason that I have to present the images in the direction in which I shot them with these kinds of things. So this is a series that I started to think of as my alien worlds from the glassware turned on its side with a red planet and a blue planet. And here the planets are touching. And another alien world. This is a water world in the front, and we're looking out through something like a cosmic black hole in the back. And another water world here with an aurora in the background. So in normal photography, the sort of bubbles that you see here would be a flaw. But with this kind of photography, you can focus on the flaw. Here's sunrise over a blue water world, and so it becomes a little bit here in this image like it's an ocean or a wave that's seeing the crest of light, and a sunset, a red sunset over the blue ocean. The little triangle on the lower right there is like a little city on this planet. So some kinds of glassware, as we'll see down below, are really patterned. With this one has these diamonds that are etched into the glass, so that can make up a specific kind of composition that's interesting here with triangles. And then with this, I'm getting more abstract. And where there are lines and creases in the glassware, that becomes a good thing to focus again. Note that, again, this is low depth of field, so only the exact part of the thing that is in focus is sharp, and back behind it, it goes nicely abstract. Again, this is not blown glass. This is glass that's been pieced together in a mold, and the crack down the mold, it becomes a subject itself of this image. Again, it's something that would be a flaw in a normal photo of glassware. Two different shaped bottles on the left here, and then a different one on the right. Get the colored light, where in something like this one, where is that red coming from? Well, I'm going through red colored liquid thanks to the dye. And you have to decide what your palette is for a given image. I'll show you a whole bunch of options once we're downstairs in addition to the colors. So I admit that Photoshop played a role in the post-production of this one, but the start here, again, is bottled light made into a piece of almost like over and under plumbing. Okay, so I have a nice part of what helps with doing this is having some glassware around. Does not have to be expensive glassware. The thing in the front I got for 50 cents at a yard sale. It's kind of this weird tall vase. The thing in the back, and I'll show it to you, I think when we were down there, I think Phyllis got at a dollar store back when they're going into dollar stores was a thing. Are there any questions, by the way?
And Renee wanted to know if there's liquid in them or not. And I typed it back that these are all bottles filled with color liquid.
Yeah, there's liquid in all of these. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to working them without, and as we'll see when I get down there, I use some other things besides bottles. I have some loose optics, just pieces of glass. I have a crystal ball that doesn't have water in it. But for the most part, I find the bottles are more interesting with liquid in them, even if the liquid is just clear water, because the light refracts once it goes into water. So refraction of light is what happens when the medium that the light is passing through is not something the light goes straight through. To some extent, flawed or old glass causes refraction, but water really does. So light does not stay the same as it refracts through water. It changes and becomes interesting. So yes, you want to pass your light through water. Some of these are photographs of the projection that a water-filled vessel makes on a white background. That's the situation here with this alien that you see. We were just debating, Phyllis and I, the gender of this alien. I don't think we came to a real conclusion.
And James has a question. Does the viscosity of the liquid change the effect?
Yeah, well, I'm sure the answer to that is absolutely yes. I mean, the viscosity of the liquid is going to, yes, but the practical implications are less than you might think. So look, the viscosity of the water is going to change the extent to which it transmits light. In other words, if you have a thick bottle of mud, light is essentially not going to go through it. Whereas if you have a thin bit of rosé wine, light passes through it very easily. So the question really is, what's the net transmissibility of light at what color spectrum through the water, if you're going to look at it? For the most part, I'm dealing with things like food color in water, or yes, I use wine bottles as a pretty good thing. I'll show you a few and what happens. I have a very interesting electric blue bottle of windshield wiper fluid that works well. I was using maple syrup for a while till we finished it all. I think olive oil is an interesting substance for this. So the viscosity of most of these substances is relatively constant, you know, and it's relatively I don't know what the right word is, but it's not like you're dealing with mud. It's more like you're dealing with a liquid.
And Sandra has a great idea of Goodwill stores often have beautiful glassware.
Absolutely. I mean, eBay, you can find a lot of it pretty cheaply too. But I like the idea of Goodwill stores. I got one piece I really like off eBay. It was a bit of a splurge, but very nice. Maybe I can pull it out and show you. And you know, it depends. For this, you know, you get very different effects from smooth glass and from cut glass. And in some ways, I like the smooth glass, the inexpensive stuff. You really don't need anything fancy for this. I mean, one of the things I appreciate about this technique is all the materials are either things one has around or really are not expensive. This is another projection here, straight out of the camera. You can see on the upper part of it, the bottom rim of the glassware I use to make the colored projections on a white background. So I turned some of them to black and white. What happens when you turn color liquid to black and white? These are a couple of the glass optic lenses that I mentioned. And so what becomes interesting here are the projections of shadows. The colors aren't the relevant part anymore. The lenses themselves are creating these shadows. And they're creating a sequence of shadows within themselves. I figured, why not try a pair of glasses? This is an L-channel LAB inversion of glasses with a black and white shadow on a piece of white paper. Back to this is a side of an optical disc with the colors from the reflected light going through. Back a more conventional one, where if you look at the glass vase on the right, you can see reflected in it the background colors. And here this is the, on the left, what you have is a vase that I often use for tall flowers that's kind of curved inward like this in a semicircle. So taking this image, actually, I could turn it on its side and it'd be kind of interesting too. So one of my suggestions here is to not be wedded to any particular direction for the final photo. You may want to turn them on its side. It may be easier to photograph it one way or another. And what kind of shapes can you find? Focusing on the light is what this one's really about, because you know that's basically a flaw in the glass is creating that weird kind of illusion there. And here I think of this as sort of a cosmic glass rainbow, but of course what it is, it's the side of a glass vase coming down with the reflection, the bottom half of the thing. And when I talked about night photography, this one always reminds me of a night highway running down. So I do have in the color set here that I showed you, I do have a couple of different blacks. I've got, well, that's navy blue, but we have here black diamond and coal black. I'm not sure what real cooks use that stuff for, but you can use that to create almost black water, or it turns out that most red wines, when you put light through the bottle, basically project black light. And so we're back to planetary stuff here.
Harold, Lorraine has the question, what kind of lighting is being used here? How many light sources are being used? Is it side lighting, backlighting?
So I only use one light source here, and it's the sun. And I'll when I go down to do some photography, I'll show you exactly what I do. And so fundamentally, this is backlighting from the sun. Only one light source. Very, very simple photography. This one is, I think it's a glass on its side where it has rings in the glass, and so the colors are projected into it. And I think of this series as like oceanic stuff in the glass. Again, here's my curved one. And this is another curve in a more conventional glass. Here's the alien in black and white as opposed to color. I guess I digitally solarized this too. And interesting how the heart got projected out by the light coming through this glass. Getting a little more complicated.
Harold, Dana would like to know what lens. Is it a macro lens?
So yes, I was going to discuss that down in the photographic area, but it never too soon to talk about that. You need to be able to get close for this stuff, obviously. So if you don't have a macro lens, you want to use probably an extension tube with a regular lens. You want to use a moderate telephoto lens. You're going to be shooting wide open. My preferred lens for this is the 85mm Lens Baby Velvet, which I shoot all the way open at 1.6, and I have a set of extension tubes for it. But any moderate telephoto lens will work so long as you can get close enough to the subject. So to get close, you're going to need either an extension tube or a close-up lens if it's not a macro lens. An 85mm or 105mm macro would be the perfect choice for this. You need to be able to set the aperture, which shouldn't be a problem, and I use aperture preferred metering for all of these. I just put them on aperture preferred metering, I put the camera wide open, and I let it do its thing. That pretty much means I don't need a tripod, because since this is sunlight, it's all very bright stuff. I'm shooting at like an 8,000th of a second or something for most of these. And I'll go over that again because that was kind of quick. And lots of lights here. I sort of think of these as like Christmas light ones. Who knew there's so much from such a simple setup? And as you'll see, it really is a simple setup. There's no huge complication. So I promised Rothko-like color fields. Well, here's a color field and another color field. And this one I did process a bit in Photoshop. I put it on a sort of background and frame that you can see a little bit in. And I think of it as a color field painting. And same thing here. Yeah, I think of this one as sort of like a marine creature there with a rainstorm coming over the ocean. I took this one and I combined it 4 ways. Another water one. Here's another Rothko. So I put that in a frame, so that counts as some kind of Photoshop. I always feel like I'm missing something if I don't get to do some Photoshop work on an image. Top of a glass vase here, you know. So again, and this one, of course, was photoshopped to create the patterns. There's really a variety from really abstract to really fairly literal, and it's a matter of taste, what you like more or what you want to do. Many of them, I have turned them on their side. This you can see is a optical round lens, and I'll show you what these pieces are with a vase in the background there and the reflections and refractions. And you know what I did try? I tried with this one, what happens if the liquid is in motion inside the vessel? So what I tried doing was I tried dropping down the food color and trying to capture it before it fully aggregated. So this is the kind of thing you get when you do that. You have to be quick. This is reflexes. Yeah, this is just something from the setup I have now that I photographed yesterday morning at about this time. So something like this is very feasible right now. And this one is a rocket launching off. And well, in that case, I think I'm going to take my food color and head downstairs. Hi, everyone. Okay, sunlight. Sunlight, come along with me. So, okay, I almost don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed. So here, this guy has got red liquid in him.
It's called blood.
Blood, no. Here, this is, I mentioned a blue windshield fluid. So another alternative would be this Sicilian wine in a big blue container like this. And you start to see these patterns. Actually, this wine isn't so good. You see these patterns. I showed some photos using the rings in this. And let's see, what else have we got here? Well, why don't we drop some purple into this guy? Okay.
And Harold, when you're ready, I've got a couple questions.
Okay, well, let me just drop some purple into here. And there we go. And stir it up and go fire with the questions.
All right. Sandra says, did Harold say a lens baby 1.6? I only see a 1.8. Would that work?
I think that's the one and only lens. Here it is. It is 1.8. Velvet 85, 1.8.
Great.
And let me go put it on my camera. What I also recommend is that you do this with a set of extension tubes, maybe, because that way you have some, whether or not you use a lens baby macro, whatever lens you use, because that gives you some flexibility in how close you're able to go. So I'm going to put, so this is a set made by Kinko of 3 extension tubes, a 20 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, and a 36 millimeter. I'm putting the 20 millimeter extension tube on and the Kinko lens like that.
And Renee would like to know, is it always on a white table?
Well, I'd like to do it on a white background because that gives me the see how the down here you've got the casting of the shadows. That gives me a whole extra palette besides the whatever is in the vases themselves. But it would be perfectly reasonable to do it on something besides white. What I also do sometimes is I cover the white in a reflective, clear reflective plastic sheet, which makes the resolution of whatever is projected. You know, you see, look how what I'm doing here is projecting. See, we've got sunlight coming through, and as somebody pointed out, we're fortunate to have all this sun. I'd be in trouble if it were a cloudy day today. You see, look how I've got a projection down here of the red, the blue, and then you can start to arrange things for the various colors. For example, I could move this in, and then I have where it's becoming a very complicated pattern, really, where see how the red and the blue and this match, and I say, oh wow, that's very, very cool. I have my ISO down at 64 at the camera's nominal value, and I have the aperture set to 1.8. I'm manually focusing on where I want to focus, and I let the camera tell me what the shutter speed here is, which is 1/3200th of a second is what it's gone for, and we can see a result right there. So I mentioned that I use these round discs. Here's something like this, adds another dimension to it all. And let's see, I can take a bottle of
Harold, can you pull that disc closer to the camera just so we can see what it looks like up close? Oh, look at that. Okay, thanks, dear.
Sure. These came from a scientific supply house online. I think it was Edmund Scientific. And oh, look at that beautiful, beautiful light right there that the rosé is making. Do you see that? And what I would want to do with that is see if I can get that light into some place where you have to be a little careful or I lose it too. But I want to have the blue and that light there. So, and yeah, so there we go. Look at that. It's like a sunrise coming up there. It's an incredible thing.
Renee is wondering if we could see it a little closer if possible. I don't know if Nicholas can sign on with his phone and give us a closer view or not. And when you have a minute, there's a couple more questions coming in.
I'm ready. I'm listening. I'm all ears, as they say.
Okay. Let's see. Lorraine says about the extension tubes for Lens Baby specifically that
it's
fit
not for Lens Baby specifically. It's any extension tube set will work with any lens.
Oh, that fit onto, as she says, any camera body.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, there you want a Nikon extension tube set for Nikon specifically, a Nikon F extension tube set for Nikon F mounts, a Nikon Z extension tube set for Nikon Z mounts, a Canon extension tube set, an E mount set for Sony. So it's camera specific, but it's not lens specific.
Okay, and let's see. Mary says, are you photographing the white covered with plastic surface or through the glass?
Well, first of all, this white, alas, doesn't have a plastic cover on it.
It's just a piece of foam board.
It's just a piece of foam board, but it would be smart to cover it with plastic, because you get sharper projections of light on it. I have photographed, let's see, just to double check. I photographed just now, I was photographing just the glass. Before that, I was photographing mostly what was projected onto the glass, onto the foam board. So both are interesting, and sometimes where they meet, the line is really interesting. But what you need to look at, as I said above, is the light, first of all. You need to focus on the light, not on the objects, and you need to think about abstractions in the sense that the direction that you point the camera is not necessarily going to be the best direction for a given composition. So people, is that giving you the idea?
Yeah, we can see the light on the board. James says better.
Good.
Okay, Mary is wondering, what is he photographing? The white foam core reflection or through a glass? Or I think it's just the colored light on the foam board, right?
Right.
So you're not focusing on the bottles or anything like that. You're just...
Maybe bring it higher so they see the context and then back in.
Right. So you're just focusing on the patterns of light on the board, correct?
Right. Well, in terms of what I've been photographing where the edges of the glassware meets the patterns of light on the board. So right here, for example, see where my finger is pointing? So we have there the color of the glassware meeting a color coming out onto the board. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's lovely. That's a great shot, Nicholas. It's really great. Danielle says, why not use an unplugged light box for the white surface?
Why not, indeed. Except that it might not. Why not, indeed. I don't know if it would show as well, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so this is 100% reflective white. There's an absorptive quality of the plexiglass from a light box.
So Mary is wondering, are you also including the glass in the image?
Yes, yes. I almost always do include at least some of the glass.
Like the edge of it?
The edge of it. You know, it's about the edge largely.
Maybe on the next one you could show us and I can get a close-up with this camera.
Okay, let's see if we can do that.
Oh, and Lorraine is wondering, would you focus on the yellow swirl?
Right now I'm focusing on, you mean by yellow swirl, we're talking about that there?
So. Yeah, the little yellow
swirl. I mean, this blue. Yeah, I mean, that yellow is very cool. It's a great line. It makes for a good composition. But of course, you play with it. So your palette here, light is doing coming through these things, right? So we're photographing bottled light is really what we're doing. And sometimes we focus on the bottle and sometimes it's on what it does. For example, this bottle that I put purple into is really pretty cool. And you could combine it with like this with red and blue, and then down here, or actually on the side here, you've got a great red purplish blue. And so I want to bring out one more toy, and that's my crystal ball, which I'm afraid is a little murky these days. But the ball itself, can you sort of show them how the ball looks? When you push light through it,
that's great, Nicholas.
It's really very beautiful. And you see how the ball itself down here adds to the complexity of the projected colors too. So what I really like doing is photographing the edges of the crystal ball along with the colors like that. And have it on aperture preferred. I don't have to worry that much about cameras or settings. I'm really just looking at
composition here. If I really want to get super snazzy, I can take one of these lenses again.
Dana would like to know, where can you get a crystal ball?
Yeah, I got it somewhere on the internet, that great place in the sky, but if you ask me where, I don't know. I'm sure that if you look up crystal ball on the internet, you put it into Google, there'll be about 100 people trying to sell you one.
You sure you didn't buy it from the Roma in Romania?
Nicholas is suggesting that last time I was in Romania that some fortune teller offered it to me, but I'm afraid, you know, it's been so murky lately that can't possibly be true. Yeah, so this is really pretty wonderful here. What the combination of the ball and I mean, you know, it's unbelievable, really. It's so beautiful. You know, it's just spectacular. Who'd have thunk it? So where do you focus? Remember to focus on the light, not the objects. The objects can take on a certain mystery. But you want the light to be clear. So always focus on the light. This is all about light. It's not about things. So, you know, I could add something else into this mix here. I could take this one and, fellas, what color shall I put in here?
I'm well, just looking in the camera and in Nicholas's view there, I'm really liking the purple I'm seeing in the bottom of that vase. It looks like it's making a beautiful shape.
From over at this angle.
Oh, yeah. It really is. I'm not going to put anything in it.
Yeah, it's just interesting with the shape and the way the water in the vase makes a change.
But you got to move it out. Oh, there you go.
And Kelly has a question when you're ready.
Go ahead, Kelly. Fire away at will.
Here's Will.
Kelly says, what do you like in particular about the Lens Baby lens that makes it good for this kind of shooting?
Well, so I'm doing this wide open, and what that means is that essentially I have very selective depth of field. Okay, it's only exactly what's focused on is going to be sharp. By the way, I'm taking off the extension too because I wanted a further out view of the thing. So the Lens Baby is really good for that. It's designed for selective focus. But if you said to me, I'm using some 85 millimeter lens or some 105 millimeter lens, particularly if it's a macro, that will work just fine for this. You don't need to go out and buy a Lens Baby Velvet.
Also, Ron, the crystal ball is around 1 inch in radius.
No, it's more than that, I
No?
think. An inch?
1 1/4 inches? It looks more like 1 inch to me. But
Yeah, I don't know.
What about the diameter?
diameter, then it would be 2.5.
If he's right about the radius, which he may or may not be.
I don't know. Take it with a grain of salt. I haven't taken a math class in a while.
Renee would like to know, it appears you are always shooting down at an angle versus directly at the side of the glass at the glass level.
Yeah, that's not always true. I mean, in this case it is because, isn't that cool? The point here is that there's the top of a vase that's refracted in the ball, which I see coming out while nothing else is there. I mean, on my chair and the height of this whole thing is set up for that, but I wouldn't hesitate to be doing it differently as well. So I wouldn't put too much stock in that, other than that there, you know, one of the things that has really shocked me, Renee, about this is that the infinitude of possible compositions with nothing much here. Sunlight, window, water, fluid, well, you know, white wine, red wine, but you know, amazing. It's just amazing. It's astounding. There's nothing much here. I'm going to say, if there are a few more questions about actual shooting this, let's handle them here, and then I'm going to go back upstairs and look at what I just shot and maybe some of the ones from yesterday too, and call it a wrap that way.
Oh, that'd be great. I don't see any questions yet, but I'll wait and see if people are typing.
Okay. Yeah. Got to watch out for labels. Labels are the bête noire of this process. Why do they put labels on things anyhow? It's a perfectly good piece of glass cleaner with ammonia. And if it has a label and I can only use half of it that way, it's not fair.
It's called marketing and capitalism.
Is that so?
Ming would like to know, could you do the set in outdoors?
Yes. Yeah, one of the things, that's a good question. One of the things that's neat about it actually is that it's not, you know, when I photograph flowers, which I like to do a lot, and sometimes I photograph flowers by sunlight, they blow around in the wind. I can't even have the window open, right? You know, even a breath of air, you know. But with this glassware with water in it, it's heavy enough, it's not going to blow around in the wind much. So sure.
And Sonia would like to know, are you going to show some simple editing?
Yes, yes, but very little has to be done for this, which is the coolest thing on the planet.
And Deborah says you are shooting down at an angle. I guess that's just because that's where you're seeing it and that's the way you're getting it.
Right, although I have been known to go like this. And then I'm going to need a little more sunlight on there. So,
which makes it worse on our faces, but say la vie.
I don't think there's any magic about the shooting down on it, honestly. I think that it's really depend on where the sunlight coming from and which. Some that I showed in the earlier, the ones that have the sort of refractions of sunlight in them, actually I was shooting up and through sunlight, like here. If I go like this, I'm going to actually get solar refractions that I can focus on, which is really pretty interesting.
And also, I think the chair is comfortable.
Well, yeah, there is that.
And Caroline would like to know, so you are mainly shooting the refracted light on the surface?
Well, I've been doing both here. It turns out that the refraction through this thing is really very interesting, but probably the most interesting of all is where the lines of oh wow, look at that. Where the lines, so now I'm looking at this here, and my thought is, let me get some color into that too. So these things are one's palette. So how do you use them to get color in? If to get color into that, I'm going to need to go up, but then if I block the sunlight coming through, it isn't quite good enough. So this is what this kind of thing is all about, is moving this stuff around to get combinations and to get the edges in with the lines of the thing. But you know, if you think about that slideshow that I gave in the beginning, there's a lot of variety in that. Some of them are not the shadows on the white at all. Some of them are just the shadows on the white. Some of them are where the shadows on the white meet the vases. And I'm not saying what's best. They're all good. I mean, look how fascinating this thing is, and the shapes that it makes in the sunlight. I mean, wow, who could want more than that? And the way the round shape in this one with the purple dye I put in and the blood in this one is wonderful. I mean, here I'm going to put the extension tube back on for this.
Just to note, it really isn't blood.
No,
it's just Halloween season, so every red liquid becomes blood.
Renee would like to know, do you ever use colored glass versus glass with colored liquid inside it?
This was one of our great street finds, Renee.
The ugliest container in Berkeley.
The ugliest container in Berkeley. But yeah, sure, colored glass is fine too. For the most part, oh geez, I have too much to photograph here. For the most part, I've been using color liquids, but I see no reason on earth not to also use colored glass. To showing people some of these things because they're very cool. Now let's see, this, as Phyllis says, or as Nicholas said, is the ugliest thing in Berkeley. And we found it on the street. And I understand why someone got rid of it.
Me too.
But it's quite wonderful. What were they thinking? Whoever made this thing. So what I'm photographing right now is the boundary where the ugliest thing in Berkeley meets the bottom here. But what I'd like to do is get a little bit of the complementary blue into it, either. Oh, well, see, so what I really try to do usually is combine colors. On the other hand, you could take a boundary, like a boundary between, oh, thanks. The boundary between, see, if you look at the boundary on the pink of the wine there and the boundary of this thing, there's a wonderful boundary condition there. So that's very cool. I'm focusing on it.
I hear you still have some editing to go through.
No, not too much. Let's see. Oh, look at what that did to the. Isn't that cool? You can see that from down at this level. Totally nuts. So, I mean, I guess what I'm really saying is have fun with it. Give me a couple of minutes, guys. I'm going to go copy this up and make it so.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Yep.
So I am copying the photos I just shot onto one of the drives here, so that, and then we'll take a look at them. 27 pictures while everyone was watching. I was really getting into it. This is what I just photographed. Okay, so remember I started with the blue in the vase and the red coming through. So that was the first. And here was a yellow light coming out, a blue. This really should be turned on its side. It was the funny picture with the blood in it.
Go slow, Harold. These are so interesting.
Aren't they wild? And just the amount of variety from this simple setup. So this was blue from the windshield wiper fluid beamed into the bottom of the red
The cruet.
Cruet thing.
With a little bit of red liquid in it, the red water.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is the edge of the cruet there is sort of the blue edge, correct? And then there's the red liquid of the cruet above that, and then there's the reflected light down on the white foam board is below, correct? That's the red?
That's exactly correct. And somewhat similar here, what you can see I focused on was the blue light refracted into the bottom of the cruet, and then there's the reflection through the cruet on the white foam board on the right, and on the left is the darker stuff in the cruet. Well, I'll come back at this image if I don't see a better one to show a post-processing issue, because what one really might want to do in post-production is lighten the left side of it. And this was the thing with the ridges. And here's where I began to get really kind of excited, because I love that pattern down there. Another pattern. this got some bizarre artifacts in the here. This is the side of the glass optical disc. So remember, I was starting to get very excited about this. This is the top of the cruet refracted in something else, and there you can see it better in this one a little. And then this is that little low thing.
It's like a little glass, I guess, for desserts or something.
Parfait glass,
a little tiny parfait glass.
And this one also ought to be turned sideways. And then I was beginning to just focus on the light. I guess somebody challenged me, don't you ever just get down low? So I was starting to get down low. So that's what these are. This one really excited me. Again, it should be turned, I'm not sure which direction, but certainly sideways. I think it should be like this, probably, and this next one also.
Though I guess artist preference, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, when I say should, I'm not sure whether I'm talking about how I shot it or how it looks best. But isn't that a wonderful abstraction there? Starting with how the reds and the blues and the lines, and I mean, just so totally cool. And then this was, I think, the last thing I shot. It began to look like a little volcano coming up here. Okay. Yeah, so we're back to the beginning. Let me open up. Let me see, which one was it that this one? Okay. So I'm going to open it twice. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to open it up again, a second copy.
You're
and
using
this time
ACR for this?
I'm using Adobe Camera Raw, and this time I'm going to bump the EV, the exposure by to make it very clear, by 3 EV.
So you're doing that for the left side so that you can see more of the detail there, correct?
That's exactly right.
And the other side, the right side, doesn't matter.
The right side, you want it darker. So really, this kind of adjustment is the only changes that I've typically made to these images. Is adjusting where there's a real exposure differential from one side to the other. So to combine the two, what I do in Photoshop. Okay, so what I'm doing then is I'm taking the lighter one and I'm putting it over the darker one, and I'm going to shut the lighter one, and I'm going to put a layer mask on top of the lighter one. Layer mask, hide all. So what we have here is we have the lighter version on top of the darker version with a hide all layer mask on the lighter version. And I want to take a gradient tool. Okay. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, if it's a little too much, you could always take that layer's opacity down just to make it less, or whatever you want to do to adjust it. If you want to adjust
paint
things.
it in with a brush, or put it at 80% like that, so that you have a world exploding beyond the world there. Let me just take a quick run through of what I photographed with the same set of props yesterday. And
Sandra has a question.
Go ahead, Sandra.
For flower transparency, we usually put the lightest image on the bottom. Any reason that you put the darker one on the top?
You know, with flower transparency, there's a good reason for going from the lightest to darkest, because you want to end up with a light white background at the back. With this kind of photography, there's no set rule of what you want, and so it really, whatever is easiest would be the example. And in this case, it was easier for me to say, okay, clearly the left is too dark, let's lighten it up. But you could go either way. It really doesn't matter. I could have also put instead of putting the lighter one over the darker, I could have put the darker one over the lighter. It's a different ball game when you're dealing with two images, one's lighter, one's darker, and you're doing that kind of adjustment, than a high key layer stack like in transparency of Lightbox, where what you want is a white background. It's also different where you're photographing on black, which is the opposite, a low key layer stack, where you really want to start with the blackest image. So in those cases, there's good reason, not that the good reason isn't sometimes deviated from, by the way, but there's good reason for going in one direction, from lightest to darkest or darkest to lightest. And these kind of things where this one's kind of interesting, isn't it? And really, the only adjustments I would do for something like this one, for example, is lighten up the bottom. And yeah, this is cool. I mean, some of these are really cool. I have more images of these. You sit there and you do this and you get carried away and you say, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. Oh, let's try this. And you end up with 500 images, and I'll never process them all, even though it's just putting them up there. This one's pretty cool. I think as time has gone on, I've got more abstract with these, but it's fun also doing ones where you can see that what it is really a vase. Yeah, that cruet, it figures bigly in my imagination these days. So this is the side of a more general one.
Sandra would like to know, in general, what percentage of images that you shoot are keepers?
Well, let me answer that.
Ooh, that's pretty.
There's so many ways to answer that question. It's a great question. Not enough. I mean, it's a funny thing because, we expect a lot of photographers. If you had a painter who did a great painting a month, and for 12 great paintings a year, you'd say, how prolific, but somehow you expect more out of photography. I find that I cannot press the shutter unless I'm really excited about what I'm doing. And on the other hand, usually when I look through them the next day or the day I do it, like now, I look at them and I say, what was I thinking? So it takes me a while to get to equilibrium and really judge images. But, I have batches of where I've never ever processed or published anything, and I have others where there were lots of publishable images coming out of it. I mean, it depends on what standards you hold. I mean, people speak of this concept of the iconic image of an artist, and reality is that even with great artists like, say, Edward Weston or Ansel Adams, there are probably half a dozen, 6 to 12 images that each are really known for. Over the course of hugely long and productive careers, so what standards are you talking about? On the other hand, would some of these images make an interesting series of bottle light images? Well, sure they would. So, it's hard for me to say, really. I don't worry too much as I'm photographing about what my yield is going to be like. I more or less try to stay in the moment and have fun with it, because I remember that photography is not golf. It's not something about what score you get. It's about being creative and having fun and being in the moment and being vulnerable about yourself and how you see things, because you're having a conversation with the viewer every time. This one is, very literal again. I think that's about it. Be creative, Keep your fingers crossed about everything. Stay healthy, stay sane. Love you all very much. And goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. Be creative and stay mighty.